Welcome to Part 3 of Ridgewood. Visit brooksaudioBooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks. And be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released. Chapter 9. The first order of business was to rest. Completely worn out, the boys pulled themselves a few feet from the water and collapsed onto the sand, thinking of nothing and feeling nothing but the need to lie still. The storm had blown in and out in a flash, and while a brisk breeze still whipped around them, the afternoon sun warmed and dried them quickly. Sam Thackeray was the first to gather his thoughts. "Hey, guys, we can't just lie here," he said, propping himself up onto his elbows. "The day is fading, and we need to get back to camp before it's dark." Tom and Henry struggled to get up. Tom managed to rise, but poor Henry couldn't seem to muster the strength. "Oh, boys," he groaned, sinking back into the sand. "I can't stop shaking. I don't know what's wrong with me." "It's just reaction," Tom explained. "Reaction? What's that?" "Well, during all that excitement, you pushed yourself to keep it together, and now you're paying for it," Tom answered. "But I wasn't shaking when we were in danger," Henry protested. "Of course not. You held it together then. Your will was in charge. It told your body to summon the strength it needed to stay calm and to do what was necessary to get you to safety. Now that the danger has passed, your will is in debt to your body. It took more than it usually would, and now your nerves and muscles are demanding payment. They're reminding your will of the stress it put them through earlier. That's how my father explained it to me once when I was trembling after a scare. Just lie still for a bit, and you'll feel better. I felt completely drained a few moments ago, but I'm starting to feel strong again now." "As weak as water," mused Sam Thackeray. "I used to think that was a good comparison, but I've changed my mind. Water is the most powerful force I know." "How that?" Tom asked. "Just think about how it picked up the red bird and hurled her down onto the sand, like an angry giant with strength 1,000 times greater. It can take massive ships and smash them apart, just as easily as I could crush an eggshell or a delicate teacup. Water is a giant, a furious entity of endless power. I will never see it as weak again." "Poor red bird," Tom said. "There are her remains." Indeed, there lay what was left of the boat, washed ashore by the swell. The tide, now receding, had left the wreck, high and dry, and without thinking, the boys moved closer to inspect it, Henry managing to move forward slowly. The wreck was a jumble of timbers, ribs, and planks, looking like a boat that had been flattened beneath some massive weight. "What kept her from breaking apart completely?" Henry asked. "Her copper bolts," Tom replied. "You see, she was built remarkably well. There wasn't a single nail in her. From bow to stern, all the fastenings were of copper, which is resilient enough that it won't snap under regular pressure. It bends instead. But if we had just crashed onto a beach in that storm, even copper bolts wouldn't have held her together. Every wave would have lifted the wreck and slammed it down onto the sand until the planks and ribs were shattered. Luckily, the red bird struck only once. The next wave picked her up and carried her clear across the reef into deeper water before letting her go, so she only took that one hit. Once she was inside the reef, she drifted with the swell toward shore. She's completely ruined and will never sail again." The boy's voice carried a note of sadness as he spoke, for he had sailed in that boat countless times and had come to cherish her as if she were alive. "I have an idea, boys," Sam said. "We need to head back to camp. We can't risk being out here tonight without supper or a fire. Between being exhausted and soaked, we'll be sick if we don't eat something and have a fire to sleep by. Let's grab a vine and tie the wreck here so it won't drift away with the next tide, and then we can get going. It's almost sunset." Once the remains of the boat were secured, the boys set off. With Henry feeling a bit stronger, they walked briskly along the shore and reached camp just as darkness fell. They built a big fire and soon enjoyed a hearty supper, complete with plenty of hot coffee. After dinner, they gladly went to bed, aching from exhaustion but truly unharmed by their adventure. Sam was the first to wake the next morning, but he didn't get up right away. He lay there quietly, deep in thought. After a time, he got up silently and before dressing, checked the food supplies. Finally, he woke his friends, and the three of them took a dip in the water. "All right," Sam said as they settled down for breakfast. "I want you boys to help me think a bit, and Tom, I need you to answer some questions." "Sure," replied Tom. "I'm already thinking." "What's on your mind?" Henry asked. "These fish aren't as fresh as they should be, so I'm going fishing before dinner." "What will you fish in?" Sam inquired. "That's true," Tom and Henry chimed in together. "We don't have a boat now." "Exactly," Sam said. "We have no boat, and that's what I want to figure out." "How far is it to Ridgewood, Tom?" "About 12 miles. "Is that the closest point on the mainland?" "Yes." "Then we need to stay here until we can figure out how to build a boat with the tools and materials we have, if that's even possible," Sam said. "We can't do it," Tom replied, his face displaying concern. "We're missing almost everything. We don't even have a plank." "Let's not get discouraged," Sam urged, stepping up as the group's leader ever since the accident yesterday. "We need to keep our heads clear and plan thoughtfully. But first, we have to acknowledge the situation. We're stuck on a deserted island, 12 miles from the mainland, with no boat. We can't leave until we find a way to get off this island, and that might take much longer than we originally thought. I doubt you meant it when you told Ma'am Lucy we'd be gone for a month, Tom." "No, I never imagined we'd stay more than a few days, or a week at most. We didn't bring enough food to last more than a week." "That's what I wanted to talk about," Sam said. "I've been checking our supplies this morning. We have to face the truth. We're low on food, and we need to use what we have wisely, being careful to find more as we go. Unfortunately, we lost our best chance for food when the gun went down with the red bird. We can't hunt, so we have to rely on other options. Do you think there's any chance of fishing from the shore, Tom?" "Probably not," Tom said, "but I might catch a few mullet with the cast net. They come into the little bays to feed, so we sometimes go after them with the net, especially at night. I can catch some shrimp and a few crabs, and I'm sure we'll find an oyster bed somewhere," Tom said. "Exactly," Sam replied. "I think we can figure out how to gather enough food. The real challenge will be making sure we have enough variety. Shrimp, crabs, oysters, and fish are fine, but we can't rely on just those for our meals. For our health, we need some variety." "That's true," Tom agreed. "Our biggest concern is going to be bread. We don't have enough flour, rice, or sweet potatoes to last more than a few days." "Right," Sam said, "and we have nothing to replace them with. We need to gather whatever vegetables we can find. But what can we find? I can't think of anything." "There are a few options," Tom responded, "though they're not plentiful." "Let's go looking for them. What are they?" Sam asked. "We might be able to find wild sweet potatoes somewhere on the island, though that's uncertain. Most root vegetables have edible parts, and I think there are wild grapes in the woods. For something filling, we can also eat different types of seaweed." "What's that?" Sam inquired. "What are they, you should say? The word is alga, and algae is its plural," Tom explained. "Enough with the grammar. We've had our fill of that at school. Just tell us what algae means," Henry interjected. "They're seaweeds. There are many varieties, and people eat different kinds around the world. They're all safe to eat and are somewhat nutritious. We'll experiment with the types that wash up here and see which ones we like best." "Should we boil them?" Sam asked. "I'm not sure. We can try that and see how it goes." "Sounds good. We need to make sure we gather enough food each day in different varieties to match what we eat. We can't risk running short and hoping for the best later. We need to save our flour and bacon for special occasions and keep them as a backup in case our other food supplies run low. We should also hold on to our coffee for when someone is sick or if we get drenched in a cold rain. There may be times when we'll really need it, so we have to manage without it for now. I believe we can make do for several weeks, and by then I hope we'll be ready to leave the island." "How do you plan to do that?" "I've got an idea, but I'm still figuring it out. It came to me yesterday, right after we landed. You two focus on finding some food while I head off to scout and finalize my plans. I'll share everything with you when I get back." As Sam left without revealing his plan, Tom and Henry went up the shore with the cast net. Within a couple of hours, they managed to catch a decent amount of shrimp, a couple of mullets, and a few oysters, though they didn't find any oyster beds as they had hoped. They planned to explore further along the shore another day to find more. With enough fish and shrimp for now, they wanted to see if they could gather some vegetables too. They didn't spot any palmetto trees, but they noticed plenty of wild grapes in the woods. Well past midday, Tom and Henry returned to camp, their arms filled with their haul from the sea and land. They found Sam sitting on a log, deep in thought. "Boys," he said, "the key is not to let anything discourage us. We have to stay strong, no matter what comes our way." "Of course," Henry replied, "but what's prompted this serious talk?" "Are you really sure that, no matter what happens, you won't give in, get scared, or lose your cool?" Sam asked. "Well, I must admit," Henry started. "Quiet, Henry," Tom interrupted. "Something's off. Let's hear what Sam has to say." "What is it, Sam? Just spill it." "Well, it's that we're completely out of food." "What do you mean?" "I mean that some animal must have raided our supplies while we were away from camp. Everything is gone, even the box of salt and the coffee. The only food we have left is what's in your bags." Chapter 10. To say the boys were shocked and distressed by their latest mishap barely captures their state of mind. There was chaos in the camp, and only Sam seemed to hold it together. Sam had an unusually calm demeanor. Under normal circumstances, he was just like any other boy. He dove headfirst into trouble without a second thought, just like when he first attempted to use the cast net, and eagerly joined in all the games and adventures that boys typically engage in. But when real challenges arose, Sam Thackeray revealed a different side of himself. He remained calm, thoughtful, determined, and resourceful. Tom first noticed this during their last journey on the Red Bird, and as their challenges grew, both he and Henry began to see Sam as their leader. They turned to him now as though he were much older and asked, "What are we going to do, Sam?" "First of all," Sam replied, "we need to stay cool. If we let ourselves get too excited, we won't be able to think clearly or do our best, and it could make us feel sick, which we definitely want to avoid. You know what they say, stress can kill. We absolutely must not panic. Really, what is there to be anxious about? We are true castaways now, but we can handle it. We've literally found ourselves stranded on a deserted island. We've lost our boat, our boots, our hats, our gun, and our food supplies, so we're not exactly in the same situation Jenkins Mariner was. But on the bright side, we won't be stuck here year after year like he was, and we have each other for company." "Sure, having company is nice," Henry Black replied, "but I'm not so sure about those other points." "What do you mean?" Tom asked. "I'm not convinced we'll get off this island any sooner than Mariner did. I don't see how we're ever getting out of here, but maybe someone will come and rescue us in 28 years or so." "Well, if they do," Tom said, "won't it be a blast to go back to school with long beards and make old Bingham take us through the rest of Caesar?" Tom's spirits were naturally high, and the thrill of their predicament was starting to lift his mood instead of dragging it down. He was too optimistic to think their enforced stay on the island would last much longer, even though he had no more idea of how to escape than Henry Black did. "Yeah," Sam Thackeray replied, "and after 28 years, we'll have a lot more to learn besides Latin. We'll need to brush up on geography to figure out how many states are in the Union, and if France has overtaken Germany, or if Russia has invaded England and moved its capital to London. Plus, Tom, your science knowledge will be outdated, and you probably wouldn't dare to mention oxygen at all, just in case someone discovered a long time ago that it doesn't even exist. We'd be like regular Rip Van Winkles. Who knows? Maybe we'll find that the United States has turned into an empire, steam engines are a thing of the past, and electricity, or some new invention we've never even heard of, is running the world. Honestly, if we end up staying here for 28 years, it might be better not to leave the island at all." Tom and Sam kept up their playful banter for a while, Tom joking just for fun, while Sam aimed to lift Henry's obvious gloom. Finally, Sam added, "But we're not going to be Rip Van Winkles or even Crusoes for too long. We'll enjoy a little adventure, and then head back home in time for school, maybe 3 weeks or a month from now, keeping Tom's appointment with Ma'am Lucy." "But how are we supposed to get back?" Henry asked. "In a boat, of course. We can't walk 12 miles over water," Sam replied. "Especially now that we're barefoot, our feet would definitely get soaked." "Where are we going to find a boat?" "Well, that's what I've been considering," said Sam, "and I think I've figured it out." "Okay, what's the plan?" Tom asked. "We should rebuild the Red Bird." "How are we going to do that? She's been smashed to bits," said Henry. "Not quite," Sam explained. "She's certainly in bad shape, but it's not entirely hopeless. I went to check on her. She's as flat as if a steamship had landed on her, but I inspected every piece of timber, and while the Red Bird isn't a boat anymore, just a pile of lumber, there's still a good amount of usable wood. Most of her planks are only slightly damaged, and the ribs appear broken in just a few places. After looking her over closely, I believe the timbers will give us enough materials to construct a new boat. We need to make a smaller one, especially a shorter one. She was 24 feet long, so if we shorten her by taking out the middle ribs, we'll have sufficient planking to create a new boat. Fixing the ribs will be the hardest part, but I think we can handle it. Most of the planks are split in two, but we can join the ends on the ribs, and if we're patient, we can build a decent boat. Patience is vital, especially for inexperienced workers like us with limited tools. We need to create solid joints if we're going to spend a week joining these two boards." "What are we going to do about nails?" asked Tom. "We hardly have a pound or two here." "We don't have a single nail left," Sam replied. "The creature that raided our supplies had a strangely varied appetite. It took our flour, bacon, salt, coffee, and sugar. It also seemed to want our nails and blankets. At least it didn't make off with our tools, since you had the hatchet, and I had the axe." "What a nuisance!" Tom exclaimed. "Yes, it's certainly a nuisance, but it could have been worse. I suspect some thieves visited us while we were away. It couldn't have been an animal, although that was my first thought when I saw our provisions missing. Whoever it was probably won't return, but we need to keep an eye on our camp, especially our tools." "But you still haven't answered my question about the nails," Tom pressed. "We can forge them from the Red Bird's copper bolts," Sam suggested. "If we run low, we can use wooden pegs instead, but I believe there's plenty of copper. Thankfully, the anchor washed ashore tangled in the wreck, which we can use as an anvil. We can hammer the bolts into nails, using the hatchet as our hammer. It will take some time, as we won't be able to use the hatchet for building the boat while it's making nails." "I have an idea," Henry said, his spirits beginning to lift. "Let's work late into the night making nails, so we'll have them ready for the next day." "Exactly, and we won't need any nails for a day or two while we're getting ready to start. This way, we can stock up in advance." "That's true," Tom agreed, "but we're wasting valuable time." The sun was just about to set, and we had a lot to finish before the day was done. We hadn't even thought about dinner yet, and we couldn't until our work was complete. We needed to bring the wreck back here tonight. The man who raided our camp was likely a squatter from one of the nearby islands, and if he spotted the wreck on his way back, he would almost certainly come over and take anything valuable from the Red Bird's remains. We had to outpace him and bring the wreck to camp as our first priority. Tom's suggestion made sense to the others, and the boys jumped into action, grabbing the axe and hatchet as they set off. By the time they reached the wreck, the tide was nearly full, which made getting the remains of the Red Bird afloat a bit easier. It was nothing more than a raft made of planks and timbers, and they had to drag it through the water along the shore using the anchor rope and some wild vines they had cut from the woods. At first, the tide was on their side, and they covered the first half-mile quickly. But when the tide turned, the work became grueling, and it was 10 at night by the time the wreck of the Red Bird was safely brought back to the camp. The boys were worn out and starving. Tom tended the fire, and set a kettle of salt water on, pouring in a couple quarts of shrimp as soon as it boiled. "We're having shrimp for dinner," he said. "That way we'll have mullet and wild grapes for breakfast." "Sounds good," Sam replied. "I'm so hungry that I'm not concerned about variety right now. We just need to eat fast." After their dinner, the boys still needed to gather a large amount of the long grey moss to use in place of the stolen blankets, so it was well past midnight by the time they finally fell asleep. Chapter 11. "What should we do to cook our fish, Tom?" Henry asked the next morning. He had already added wood to the glowing embers as Tom and Sam emerged from the hut. "We ought to roast them," Tom replied. "Since we don't have any bacon to fry them with, roasting will be our best option. We can alternate between broiling and roasting for a bit of variety. Broiled fish can be rather dry without butter. I'll take charge of cooking this morning and show you how to roast small fish." With that he strolled to the beach, walking along the shoreline until he found a handful of clean, wet seaweed. Returning to the fire, he carefully wrapped the mullets in the seaweed and placed them in the hot ashes, covering them with glowing coals to ensure they cooked thoroughly. Half an hour later, he gently unwrapped them and set the fish on the log that served as their table. They were perfectly cooked and looked incredibly appetizing. However, as Sam took a bite, his face fell in dismay. "I didn't think of that," Sam said. "We're out of salt. What are we going to do? We can't survive solely on shrimp and oysters. Fish without salt is tough to eat." "We need to make some salt," Tom suggested. "From the seawater?" Henry asked. "Yes, it's a slow process, and without anything to clarify it, the product will be somewhat darker, but it will still be salt." "What makes it black?" Sam inquired. "Impurities. Seawater contains a mix of substances, mostly common salt, but also Glauber's salts, Epsom salts, magnesia, and a variety of others, including silver and iron salts. When we extract salt from seawater, we need to deal with those impurities, or the salt will end up a dirty brown color. We can't clarify it, but we can still use it effectively for our needs. Our breakfast may be less than ideal, but we'll manage to do better by evening. I'll get started on our saltworks right after breakfast, and then I'll leave Henry in charge, because I have a plan I want to pursue. Today must be focused solely on finding food, I suppose." "Yes, that's the first order of business. We're at the brink of starvation and need to eat something before we tackle the boat. What's this plan you mentioned?" "I'm not going to tell you, as it might not amount to anything, though I'm hopeful." "All right, I hope it works out. In the meantime, I'll take the cast net to catch some shrimp and maybe a fish. If I had some bait, I'd set some rabbit traps or something similar, but I don't, so that's out of the question. Henry can handle the saltworks while you do whatever it is you've got in mind." The saltworks consisted of just a kettle. Filling it with clear seawater, Tom set it to boil and said, "Now, Henry, as it boils down, keep adding more water. By tonight, we can stop adding and let the salt settle. It should start settling before then, and when it does, you can scoop the wet salt up from the bottom and spread it out on a plank to dry." "Got it. I'll make a dipper out of a tin cup by attaching a stick for a handle. But what causes the salt to settle?" "Well, you see, you can only dissolve a certain amount of salt in a specific amount of water. If you add more, it sinks to the bottom since it's heavier than water. When a liquid has as much of something dissolved in it as it can hold, we call it saturated. It's known as a saturated solution. When you boil seawater, it evaporates, and the amount of water gradually decreases. After a while, much of the water evaporates, leaving us with a saturated solution. If you evaporate another half pint, the salt that this amount of water can hold will settle at the bottom. It's fascinating that water saturated with one substance can still dissolve others, even when it can't hold any more of that first substance. Sometimes, when making salt, people take advantage of this fact." "How?" asked Sam, intrigued by Tom's explanation. "Well, they wash out the impurities from the salt using salt water. They take a batch of impure salt and place it in a funnel-shaped vessel with a small hole at the bottom. Then they create a saturated solution using clear water and pure salt. This solution can't dissolve any more salt, but it can still dissolve the impurities. When they pour this solution into the vessel with the impure salt, it passes through, dissolving and carrying off the impurities without affecting the salt itself. "Why can't we purify our salt that way?" Henry asked. "Because we don't have any pure salt to make the solution." "That's true, but I didn't think of that. I wish I knew as much as you do about these things." "I don't know much," Tom replied. "I've always been curious about facts like these, and my father has encouraged me to learn. I ask questions and read whatever books I can find, but I learn the most by observing and figuring things out for myself. Still, I know very little about scientific matters, really. But we're wasting time. I have to go, and so do you, Sam. Keep the salt kettle boiling, Henry, and don't forget to add water from time to time. When you pour in cold water, you can skim off the scum and get rid of a lot of impurities that way." With that, the boys went their separate ways. Sam strolled along the shore, cast-net in hand, while Tom ventured into the woods with the coffee pot, which had fallen out of use at camp now that they were without coffee. Around noon, Sam returned, proudly displaying a good catch, a handful of shrimp, half a dozen fish, a few crabs, and some oysters. He also brought exciting news of a large oyster bed easily accessible by wading at low tide. Henry welcomed him with a triumphant grin. "Look here, Sam," he said, pointing to a plank that had a couple of small white piles on it. "Tom has missed the mark this time. I've got perfectly white salt, just as you see, not that dark, impure stuff he predicted I'd end up with. And that's not all. Instead of sinking to the bottom of the kettle, it rises to the top for skimming." "I could have told you that," Tom chimed in, having approached unnoticed. "It's just how it works. Give your salt a taste, Henry." Henry complied, his expression turning to one of confusion as he faced Tom. "What is it, buddy?" he asked. "Why, it's perfectly white salt, of course," replied Tom. "Isn't that what you claimed it was?" "Yes, I said that," Henry conceded, "but now I see the truth. It has no taste." "Magnesia usually is tasteless," Tom explained. "Is that what this is?" Henry asked. "Yes, mostly. It might be mixed with a few other things, but it's primarily magnesia. That's why I told you to skim it. We don't want that in the salt." "But I don't have any salt," Henry protested. "I've been filling the kettle every 15 minutes, but no salt has settled out yet." "Your solution isn't saturated yet," Tom pointed out. "This water has only about 2% salt, or maybe 3% in its impure state. To produce 1 kettleful of salt, we need to boil away 30 to 50 kettlefuls of water. The kettle holds 2 gallons, so to get a pint of salt, we need to boil away 2 or 3 kettlefuls of water. You've filled it up enough for today. Now keep it boiling, and we should be able to get a pint or 2 of salt before nightfall. In the meantime, we can pour some of the boiled water over our fish for dinner because I'm pretty hungry." "By the way, Tom," Sam said, "how did your foraging go?" "Good. I brought back a coffee pot that's half full and made plans to gather more tomorrow." "Well, I enjoy puzzles and riddles like that," Sam replied, "but I don't like waiting for next month's edition to find the answer. What do you have in the coffee pot?" "Bread," Tom answered, "or something like it. I've been collecting seeds from grasses and weeds." "Seeds from grasses," Henry exclaimed. "Who ever heard of anyone eating grass seeds?" "You've turned a bit cynical, Henry, since your faith in your lovely white salt took such a hit," Tom said. "But I believe some grass seeds are eaten by people, like wheat, for example, and rice and corn." "That's true," Henry admitted, looking a bit sheepish. "I just never thought of wheat and rice as grasses, but are wild grass seeds safe to eat?" "Yes, of course. All common grass seeds are made up of essentially the same nutrients, and they're all nutritious. I've gathered about a quart, planning to mash them into a sort of bread, but I don't have time for that now, so I'll just boil them for dinner. The main thing is to have some grain food to eat, and this way we'll have it somewhat like rice." "That's a great idea, Tom," Sam said. "Is there plenty of seed to collect?" "Yes, now that I know where to find it, even if gathering such seeds takes a while. I just need to collect it and winnow it." I can winnow a bit faster next time, because I'll take something to winnow on, even if it's just a clean handkerchief. I've thought of something else, too. What's that? Henry asked. Acorns and other nuts. They're still a bit green, but they're nutritious, and we can mash them into a decent bread. Pigs get fat on them, so there's no reason they wouldn't be good for us. I also plan to search for some edible roots if I can. What a fantastic provider you are, Tom, Henry said, especially since we already have oysters and shrimp to start with. Well, Tom replied, I've been thinking that we wouldn't starve, even if we didn't have water as a supply. How that? In looking for different foods, I've realized there are quite a few things that can sustain us in desperate times. If it came down to it, we could eat snails and earthworms for meat. Ah, Henry exclaimed. Well, both snails and earthworms are considered delicacies by many in France. They even have snail farms where they raise them for market. As a business. Yes, as a business. There's a market for snails that pay high prices because some people really enjoy them. We could probably catch a few snakes and lizards here too. In fact, I killed a snake this afternoon. If I hadn't been worried about grossing you guys out, I would have brought it home as a valuable addition to our food supply, since snakes are surprisingly good to eat. Have you ever eaten one? Sam asked. Yes, or at least a part of one. There's no good reason not to eat snakes other than an unfounded bias. Their meat is actually quite good and healthy. Hooray for our scientist, Sam said. I'm starting to realize that our food supply is a lot better than I thought. I'm planning to have snake for breakfast some mornings soon for a change. Why, we'll soon be living like kings. Are you really going to set aside your reservations, Sam, and eat a well-cooked snake? Tom asked. Of course I will, Sam replied. And you, Henry? I don't see any reason not to, now that I think about it, Henry said. Great, I'll go get my snake. It's not even 100 yards away, and it'll provide us with protein, which is far more sustaining than just relying on fish and such. The snake, a large one, was brought back to camp, skinned, prepared, and roasted to a crispy brown over the coals. When it was ready, it looked and smelled delicious, and the boys, naturally quite hungry after their meager breakfast and hard work, devoured it with gusto, pairing it with some boiled grass seeds. The only complaint about the grass seeds was that there weren't nearly enough. The salt kettle had been filled more often than Tom expected, and they ended up with nearly a quart instead of just a pint. Now we're starting to figure out how to live well, Sam said. We just need to get a good start and keep a decent supply of food on hand. But we must gather a good stock of seeds tomorrow. I'll go with you, Tom, and we can both work on that while Henry watches the camp and makes salt. Tomorrow is Sunday, Henry pointed out. No, it isn't. Today is Friday, Sam countered. Let's see, Tom started. We arrived at Ridgewood on Monday evening, right? The next day we went fishing, that was Tuesday. On Wednesday we moved over here. Then Thursday, the wreck of the Red Bird happened. Yesterday, Friday, we spent the day getting food and bringing the wreck to camp. So today is Saturday. Good thing Henry reminded us. We can't work tomorrow, so we need to catch plenty of shrimp and fish with the net tonight. The boys toiled with the net until nearly midnight, then slept in late the next morning. They honored Sunday as a day of rest, which was something they truly needed at that moment. It was decided that on Monday morning, Sam and Tom would go after grass seed, while Henry would tend to the camp, make salt, and use the net. Chapter 12. The harvest of seeds that Tom and Sam needed for their supplies was located in an abandoned field, half a mile from their camp. Here, wild grasses and weeds grew thickly, already ripened by the sun. Some of the plants produced seeds so tiny and few that it was hardly worth the effort to collect them. Others had larger, more plentiful seeds. Many of the weeds provided a generous amount of seeds, almost the size of wheat grains, but these were mostly useless. Tom was the group's designated scientist, and it was his job to figure out which seeds to collect and which to leave behind. He was familiar with the common plants in the area and knew which ones were poisonous. Now it was just a matter of deciding whether a seed that was known to be harmless had any nutritional value. Tom's approach was straightforward. He would bite into a seed to check its flavor and general characteristics. Then he'd split it open to take a closer look. If the inside seemed to contain mostly starch, gluten, and some fruity matter, he would consider that seed good. If it appeared dry, hard, and black inside, he judged it worthless. After passing the spot where he had gathered seeds the day before, Tom found a suitable place for a thrashing floor. He said, "All right, Sam, I'm going to clear a space here to get ready for thrashing. We'll be more efficient this way. You head over there and collect some grasses. I'll join you soon, and when we have enough, we can thresh for a bit." With that, the boys went their separate ways. Tom worked diligently on his clearing, while Sam returned with armfuls of grass. After some time, Tom finished his task and began to wonder where Sam had gone, as he had been absent for a while. He called out, but there was no response. Shrugging it off, Tom continued gathering grass. Still, Sam didn't come back, and after an hour had passed, Tom began to feel uneasy. He called out again, and Sam responded, but his voice was far away. Continuing his task, Tom waited, and soon he heard Sam making his way through a thicket of briars, muttering complaints with noticeable fervor. "What's going on, old friend?" Tom asked. "Plenty," Sam replied from within the thicket, where he was nearly hidden. "These briars are tearing me to shreds, and by the time I reach you, I won't have enough skin left to serve as patches." "That's nonsense," Tom said. "Cover your face with your arm and push right through. Your clothes are sturdy enough." "True," Sam replied, "but the problem is I'm not wearing them." Tom sprang to his feet, having been kneeling to arrange the grass for thrashing. He remembered how swiftly he and his companions had lost their possessions, and now they were without a boat, boots, hats, or even a steady supply of food. So when Sam announced that he wasn't dressed, Tom immediately feared some new disaster had struck him. "What, no clothes? At this rate, we'll be naked savages within a week." "I didn't say I had no clothes," Sam clarified, still navigating carefully through the briars. "I only meant I don't have them on, at least not any worth mentioning." "Well then, you must be out of your mind," Tom replied. "Why don't you just put them on?" "Because I can't until we get to camp," Sam said, and with that, he took a final leap into the clearing and stood before his astonished companion. He looked quite a sight. His only garments were his drawers and a thin undershirt, both torn and stained with blood from numerous scratches. Sam's face was also scratched, but the triumphant gleam in his eyes made Tom forget to notice the wounds from the briars. Sam's trousers, tied at the bottom and stuffed with some heavy material, rested across his shoulders, resembling the lower half of a particularly stout boy. In one hand, he carried his well-filled shirt, while in the other he held a bundled coat, also packed to the brim. "What on earth have you crammed your clothes with, Sam?" Tom asked, his surprise evident. "Grass seed," Sam replied, dropping his load onto the ground. "Not much," Tom said, shaking his head. "It would take both of us a month to gather and thresh that much." "I thought you smart folks always valued facts above any number of must-bes. Here I've got the facts. Trousers full, a shirt full, and a coat full, and still you debate what might be and what can't be." "I recognize your trousers, shirt, and coat are indeed full," Tom conceded, "but I question what's inside them. I just can't believe you could gather that much grass seed in such a short time." "Not of the kind that grows here, but mine aren't from this area." "Let me see them," Tom insisted. "Not until we reach camp. I can't open the bags without making a mess." "Then tell me about it." "Well, I was collecting grasses over by those tall trees when I happened to glance southward. There, about half a mile away, I spotted what looked like a patch of ripe wheat or oats. It covered 2 or 3 acres in a sort of marsh, so I went over to check it out. I discovered a small marsh thick with tall grass similar to oats, and it had all gone to seed. The seeds are about the size of wheat grains, but a bit longer, and each one, when threshed, is covered in a brown husk that clings tightly to the grain. The seeds are starchy, sticky, and if I'm not mistaken, they're great food. It was too far to call you, so I decided to thresh some grass and take what I could get. I stuffed my shirt, coat, and trousers, and I would have used my drawers too if I could have carried any more. As it stands, I've got quite a load." "I'd say so," Tom replied, "and a really good one too, if I'm right." "What do you think it is?" "Grass seed," Tom said, "the kind we call rice." "But how did it end up there?" Sam asked. "Does rice grow wild?" "Sometimes it does. When a rice field is left too long before harvesting, the grain falls out of the heads, and the next year you get a nice volunteer crop. In this case, I think the explanation is straightforward. When the island was abandoned during the war, there was likely a growing crop of rice in that little swamp. If that's true, it went to seed, and since it wasn't harvested, the seeds dropped to the ground and sprouted again the following year, repeating the cycle year after year. That's my take on it anyway, and the only one I can think of. But come on, let's head to camp. It's not worth wasting time on this grass. Now that we've found a rice field, we'll have rice instead, and soon we'll go there and gather enough to last us until we leave the island. When they reached camp, the contents of Sam's clothes turned out to be, as Tom had guessed, rough rice, meaning it was rice with the outer husks removed, leaving only the tightly clinging inner husk on the grain. The amount they had gathered was enough to last the boys for quite a while, and without bread, it was something of great importance to them.